I used to think geography was just lines on a map, but standing here looking at the narrow chokehold of the Bab el Mandeb Strait, I realize those lines are actually tripwires, and the world just tripped every single one of them. You've seen the headlines, Yemen has officially entered the fray, but what the mainstream media is missing is the terrifying reality behind the curtain. This isn't just another regional skirmish, it's a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. For months, the Pentagon has been playing a high-stakes game of chess, but while they were focused on the grandmasters in the north, they didn't realize the board had been flipped from the south. We didn't just stumble into a conflict, we walked straight into a two-front trap that was decades in the making. To understand how we got pinned down, you have to look at the sheer audacity of the opening move. For years, Yemen was dismissed as a fractured state, a place of internal chaos that couldn't possibly project power on a global scale. We were wrong. By the time the first missiles tracked toward the Red Sea, the trap was already sprung. Imagine the world's most vital artery, a corridor that carries nearly 15% of global trade, suddenly becoming a kill zone. I watched as the most sophisticated naval fleet in human history was forced to play defense against drones that cost less than a used car. The power dynamic shifted overnight. The U.S. moved its carriers into position to deter a massive regional escalation, but by doing so, they committed their most expensive assets to a corner of the world they can't afford to leave and can't afford to stay in. This was the first front, the economic and maritime stranglehold that forced America to choose between global commerce and military overextension. But the maritime chaos was only the bait. The second front of this trap is much more psychological and, frankly, much more dangerous. While our billion-dollar destroyers are busy intercepting $2,000 drones in the Red Sea, the strategic focus of the United States has been effectively split in half. It's a classic pincer movement, but not one fought with tanks on an open field. On one side, you have the political pressure to defend a key ally in the north, and on the other, an emerging, unpredictable threat in the south that refuses to play by the traditional rules of engagement. I've seen how military planners operate. They crave stability and predictable enemies. Yemen offered neither. By drawing the U.S. Navy into a prolonged defensive war of attrition, the opposition has achieved the unthinkable. They've made the world's superpower look reactive. Every missile we fire to intercept a cheap drone is a win for them. We are depleting stockpiles of high-end munitions to swat at flies, all while the real trap tightens, a forced exhaustion of resources and political will that leaves us vulnerable if a third front ever opens up. We aren't just fighting a militia anymore, we are fighting a clock that is slowly running out. The terrifying part isn't just the missiles, it's the silence that follows. When a global power gets bogged down in a place it never intended to stay, it loses the one thing it can't buy back: initiative. I look at the logistics and the math just doesn't add up. We are burning through millions of dollars an hour to maintain a presence in a region that was supposed to be a secondary concern. This is exactly what the architects of this trap wanted. They knew they didn't have to sink a carrier to win, they just had to make the cost of staying higher than the cost of leaving. But here's the catch. If the U.S. pulls back, the global economy collapses as shipping lanes turn into a graveyard. If we stay, we are bleeding out in slow motion. It's a strategic stalemate where every move feels like a mistake. We've been lured into a conflict where there is no clear victory condition, only a cycle of escalation that plays right into the hands of those who want to see the old world order dismantled piece by piece. We are standing on a fault line and the ground is starting to give way. What's truly chilling is the realization that this isn't a localized fire. It's a distraction designed to mask a much larger shift in the global power structure. While our eyes are glued to the horizon of the Red Sea, the ripple effects are tearing through the fabric of international alliances. I'm seeing traditional partners start to hedge their bets, questioning if the umbrella of American protection is starting to leak. The trap isn't just about military hardware, it's about the erosion of American prestige. By forcing a superpower to engage in a forever skirmish, With an adversary that has nothing to lose, the opposition is proving that high-tech dominance has a massive, glaring blind spot. We are being lured deeper into a regional quagmire that drains our treasury and distracts our leadership, precisely when the world stage is more volatile than it's been in 80 years. The walls are closing in, and the exit strategy is nowhere to be found. We thought we were entering the room to restore order, but we didn't realize the door had been locked behind us. The endgame here isn't a sudden explosion, it's a slow, deliberate strangulation. As I trace the supply lines and the diplomatic cables, a grim picture emerges. The trap is designed to be permanent. We've reached a point where the cost of winning has become indistinguishable from the cost of losing. Every day we stay anchored in these waters, we are validating a new era of warfare where the small and the decentralized can paralyze the giant. This was never about a single country entering a war. It was about forcing the world's only superpower to fight a ghost. We came here to show strength, but in doing so, we've exposed the limits of that strength. The two-front trap is now fully set, and as the tension reaches a breaking point, the question isn't how we win, it's how much we're willing to lose before we admit we walked into it with our eyes wide open. The chess pieces are scattered, the board is broken, and for the first time in a generation, the next move isn't ours to make. As I look at the map of the region now, I don't see a battlefield anymore. I see a graveyard of strategies. We've entered a phase where the trap has evolved from a military hurdle into a psychological cage. The world is watching, and what they see is a superpower tied down by an adversary that doesn't use a traditional capital or a formal army, yet manages to dictate the price of oil in New York and the cost of grain in London. We are no longer just defending shipping lanes. We are defending the very idea that a global police force can still maintain order. But you can't police a ghost, and you can't intimidate a force that sees your expensive intervention as their greatest recruiting tool. The scary part is how quiet the realization is becoming in the halls of power. There's a growing sense of, what now? We've deployed the best technology, the brightest minds, and the most lethal hardware, only to find ourselves in a circular argument with gravity. Every move to stabilize the region only seems to cement our presence there, making us a permanent target in a game where we pay for every move and our opponent plays for free. We came to put out a fire, but we've ended up becoming the fuel. The trap has tightened to the point where even standing still feels like falling behind. We are now witnessing the birth of a new world order, one where the giants are kept in check not by other giants, but by the very traps they thought they were too big to fall for. Looking back at the history of failed interventions, I realize we are repeating the same fatal mistake, but on a much more dangerous scale. This isn't just a military deployment anymore. It's a massive transfer of power. Every day the U.S. stays pinned down in this two-front dilemma. Our adversaries elsewhere are taking notes. They're seeing that the world's most advanced military can be distracted, drained, and ultimately neutralized by a strategy of 1,000 small cuts. I see the frustration in the eyes of the men and women on the ground. They are trained for decisive battles, for clear objectives and honorable conclusions. Instead, they are being used as human shields for global trade, stuck in a holding pattern while the strategic initiative slips through our fingers like sand. We've been caught in a loop where the mission is simply to exist until tomorrow. But tomorrow keeps getting more expensive. The trap isn't just about the physical conflict, it's about the slow realization that the era of uncontested dominance ended the moment we stepped into this narrow corridor of water. We didn't just enter a war zone, we entered the twilight of an era, and the sun is setting fast. The final realization hits you like a cold wave. We are no longer the ones setting the pace. For decades, the world operated on the assumption that American power was an immovable object. But in the narrow straits and rugged mountains of this conflict, we found the irresistible force. I see the pivot happening in real time, a shift where the hunter becomes the hunted, not through a lack of firepower, but through a lack of focus. We are watching a masterclass in how to dismantle a giant without ever firing a shot at its heart. By bleeding our resources, dividing our attention, and mocking our sophisticated defenses with sheer persistence, the trap has achieved its ultimate goal. It has made the impossible seem inevitable. The global stage is being reset, and as we struggle to untangle ourselves from this two-front nightmare, the rest of the world is moving on. We walked into the trap thinking we were the solution, only to find out we were the missing piece they needed to complete the puzzle of our own decline. The warning signs were all there, etched into the history of every empire that overreached. We just chose not to read them until the door clicked shut. It's a sobering thought, standing on the edge of a map that is being redrawn in real time. We've reached the point where the cost of security has become a tax on our future. I watch as the rhetoric from Washington grows louder, but the actions on the ground remain paralyzed. We are caught in a feedback loop, sending more assets to solve a problem that was created by our presence in the first place. This is the hallmark of a perfect trap, when your only response is exactly what your enemy predicted you would do. Every ship we escort and every interceptor we launch is a signal to the rest of the world that the old rules are officially dead. We are witnessing the democratization of destruction, where a small group with a clear purpose can hold the entire global engine hostage. It's no longer about who has the biggest fleet, it's about who can endure the longest. And as I look at the exhaustion setting in, both in our military and our economy, I have to wonder if we were ever prepared for a war of endurance. We didn't just walk into a trap, we built the cage ourselves, one intervention at a time, and now we're finding out that the key was never in our pocket to begin with. In the end, the most terrifying realization isn't the strength of the enemy, but the fragility of our own system. Standing here, watching the horizon, I see a world that has fundamentally changed. We've spent trillions to build a shield that was supposed to be impenetrable, only to find that the smallest cracks can bring the whole thing crashing down. This two-front trap wasn't just a military maneuver, it was a wake-up call that the rest of the world has already heard while we're still hitting the snooze button. As the sun sets over the Red Sea, the silhouette of our massive warships looks less like a show of force and more like a ghost from a different century. We came here to project power, but all we've projected is a lack of an exit strategy. The trap is now our new reality. It's no longer a question of when we'll leave, but what will be left of our global standing when we finally do. The world didn't just change because Yemen entered the war. It changed because we showed everyone exactly how to stop us. And once that secret is out, there's no going back. The trap is closed, the lines are drawn, and for the first time in history, the giant is just waiting to see what happens next. The final move in this game isn't a grand explosion. It's the quiet realization that the chessboard itself has been set on fire. As I look at the intelligence reports and the shifting alliances, I see the endgame becoming clear. We are being forced to watch as our influence, built over decades, is dismantled in a matter of months. This wasn't a war we could win with firepower because it was never a war about territory. It was a war about perception. The two-front trap succeeded because it forced us to reveal our hand to the entire world. It showed that our massive carrier groups, the ultimate symbols of 20th century power, can be neutralized by 21st century persistence. I realize now that we didn't just walk into a trap, we walked into a mirror. It's reflecting back the image of a superpower that has plenty of muscle but nowhere to put its weight. As the smoke clears from the latest skirmish, one thing is certain: the world is no longer afraid of the giant. They've seen the giant get stuck. And as we scramble to find an exit that doesn't look like a retreat, we have to face the hardest truth of all. We might have been the last ones to realize the game was already over. I've seen this story play out before, but never with stakes this high. As the dust settles on this new landscape, the reality is starting to sink in. The trap wasn't just about pinning down our navy or draining our treasury, it was about breaking the spell of invincibility. We've been forced into a defensive crouch in a part of the world we thought we controlled, while the rest of the globe watches the giant struggle to swat away shadows. It's a chilling conclusion to reach, but standing here, looking at the geopolitical wreckage, I can't help but feel that we've crossed a point of no return. We came to hold the line, but the line has moved. We came to deter an enemy, but we ended up providing them with a blueprint for how to defeat us without ever engaging in a fair fight. The two-front trap is now the new status quo, a permanent drain on our focus and our future. We walked into the Red Sea expecting a short-term crisis, but we found a long-term eclipse of our own power. The trap didn't just catch us, it changed us. And as the world moves into this uncertain new chapter, the only thing left to wonder is who will be the next to trip the wires we're still tangled in. As I reflect on the quiet tension of the current moment, it's clear that the greatest damage isn't the physical toll on our equipment, but the shattering of the global status quo. For nearly a century, the rules of the sea were written in Washington, enforced by the mere presence of a hull on the horizon. But today, those rules feel like relics. I'm watching the world adapt to a new reality where the unbeatable is being challenged by the unconventional, and the results are shifting the very foundations of international law. This is the final, most bitter layer of the trap. By forcing us to fight on their terms, in their backyard, they've turned our greatest strengths into our most visible liabilities. Every time we are forced to divert a cargo ship or reroute a tanker, the world sees a crack in the armor. It's a slow motion unraveling of a superpower's promise to keep the world moving. We didn't just stumble into a military conflict, we walked into a geopolitical reset. The trap was never meant to destroy us. It was meant to reveal that we could be stopped. And now that the secret is out, the world will never look at the map the same way again. We are left standing in a room with no corners, trying to fight an enemy that is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The weight of this situation finally hits home when you realize that we aren't just losing money or missiles, we're losing time. In the world of high-stakes geopolitics, time is the only currency that actually matters. While we're locked in this endless loop of intercept and respond, our long-term rivals are moving their pieces across the rest of the globe with zero interference. They're watching us exhaust our personnel, burn through our specialized munitions, and test our public's patience for a war that has no front line and no finish line. I see it now. The trap was designed to be a vacuum. It's sucking the oxygen out of every other strategic priority we have. We're so busy staring at the drones in the sky that we've lost sight of the shifting tectonic plates beneath our feet. This is how empires begin to tilt, not with a single massive blow, but by being lured into a corner and kept there until they become irrelevant to the rest of the world's ambitions. We walked in thinking we were the main characters of this story, only to find out we were the ones being kept busy while the real story was happening somewhere else. The trap didn't just catch our ships, it captured our future. The ultimate irony of this situation is that our own technology, the very thing that was supposed to make us untouchable, has become our greatest burden. I've watched as we deploy systems worth hundreds of millions of dollars just to keep pace with a threat that is virtually free to maintain. It's a math problem we can't solve, and our opponents know it. They've successfully turned our pursuit of perfection against us, forcing us to use a sledgehammer to try and kill a swarm of mosquitoes. Standing here today, it's obvious that the trap has reached its final stage, exhaustion, not just of the machines, but of the spirit. We are seeing a superpower being forced to justify its existence in a region that no longer fears its shadow. The two-front trap has done more than just divide our military. It has divided our sense of purpose. We are left asking ourselves if the cost of maintaining the old world is worth the price of losing our place in the new one. We didn't just walk into a snare in the Red Sea. We walked into the end of an era where we got to decide how the story ends. Now, for the first time, We're just another player on the board, waiting for someone else to make the next move. As I watch the final pieces of this geopolitical puzzle slide into place, I'm struck by the realization that we've been looking at the wrong map. We thought this was about a specific stretch of water or a specific group of insurgents, but the trap was always much larger. It was a cognitive trap. We believed that if we just showed up with enough force, the world would snap back into the order we created after 1945. Instead, our presence has only served to highlight how much the world has moved on without us. I'm seeing a new generation of strategists across the globe studying this moment, realizing that the giant's strength is also its greatest weakness. Our need to protect everything at all times means we can be baited anywhere at any time for any reason. We've become a superpower on a tether, and our adversaries are the ones holding the string. The two-front trap in Yemen and the Red Sea wasn't the end of the game. It was the opening ceremony for a new kind of global competition where being the biggest just makes you the easiest target to hit. We are standing in the middle of a shifting tide, realizing too late that the ground we were sworn to protect has already washed away. So here we are, standing at the edge of a cliff, watching the horizon for a threat we still don't fully understand. I used to believe that power was about who had the most satellites, the fastest jets, and the loudest voice. But as I look at those dark waters tonight, I realize I was wrong. True power belongs to the one who can make a superpower blink. The trap is no longer something we are in. It has become who we are. We've been hollowed out by a ghost war, lured into a two-front nightmare that has no exit sign and no mercy. As the world turns its back on the old rules, I can't help but feel a chill that no desert sun can warm. We spent decades preparing for a world war that would end with a bang, but we never prepared for this. A slow, agonizing slide into irrelevance. The silence out there, it isn't peace. It's the sound of a vacuum being filled by someone else. The giant hasn't fallen yet, but for the first time in history, the giant is tired. And in this game, once you show the world you're tired, the vultures don't wait for you to stop moving. They just start circling. I look at the radar one last time, and for a split second, I see it. Not a drone, not a missile, but the reflection of what comes next. The age of the untouchable is over. The trap is shut. And the scariest part? We're still inside, waiting for a dawn that might never come.